All right, well, my clock says noon, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Heidi Garvin with GROW Nebraska, and I'd like to welcome you all to GROW Nebraska's third Thursday training. So for those of you who don't know, GROW Nebraska is a 501c3 nonprofit that helps small Nebraska businesses with their marketing and promotion and helps them grow. So today's topic is perfectly in line with that mission to help Nebraska's entrepreneurs reach the global marketplace. Today, we are going to be talking about how you can get started with selling internationally. Now, these trainings, we have them the third Thursday of every single month. They are free and open to the public, but we would not be able to do this without the help of our amazing sponsors. So today, our sponsor is the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. And Hunter, I believe you are on the line. I will turn it over to you to say just a few words. Well, I see his name. All right. Well, we will move forward. The Nebraska Department of Agriculture is an amazing sponsor, and they have tons of programs for growers and sellers, producers, all sorts of things. So if you haven't had a chance to check out their resources, we are going to be sending out a handout from them following this training. And our featured member today is Lundeen-Isaacson Insurance out of Holdrege, Nebraska. They have been a proud GROW Nebraska member since 2011. And I don't see that Bob has joined us. Bob, are you on the line? Nope. Well, they have amazing services for businesses. It is very important to have insurance for your business. You never quite know what's going to happen, and it's better to be safe than sorry. Now we will turn it over to our amazing presenter. Today's presenter is Dennis Lynch from Food Export Midwest. So, Dennis, I am going to give you control, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay, Heidi, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for spending some time with us to talk about exporting food and agricultural products from the United States. And my name is Dennis Lynch. I am the Food Export Helpline Counselor for Food Export Midwest, which is headquartered in Chicago. And Heidi, I need to be able to advance this slide. I don't see my, oh, there it is. Okay. Yep. Clicking on the arrow, there we go.
Awesome.
Thank you. Exporting is really important for the United States economy, especially making products, of course, and that increases manufacturing jobs and all the things that are in the news today about how to improve the economy. A lot of it, of course, revolving around exporting products that are manufactured. Manufactured jobs add a lot of value into all aspects of the economy. So a lot of products that, of course, grown out of the soil can be exported after they're harvested, but there's also a lot of different things that you can do with them that adds value down the chain. For example, wheat or corn can be made into bread and cookies and soup mixes and things like that. So it's a big deal. And it's still true, and I check this every few months, that the United States has just about 5% of the world's population. And one thing that's important to remember about that is that there's millions and millions of people who not only are interested in U.S. food products, but also can afford them. And the old business saying goes that when you have more customers rather than fewer, you're diversifying your risk. Meaning if you can get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 good export customers over that same amount of years, let's say, you're doing really well. You have more customers in more places in the world, especially when seasons change. For example, we're going into summer now here as of today. In fact, today is the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. Well, they're going into winter in Australia and Brazil, which means the products that they might prefer down there in those countries, we prefer in our December. So you have that kind of extension. To extend the life cycle of a product means that it's new in other markets. And maybe there's a little pressure in the United States to always come up with something new, but if you're finding other countries that might be interested, it's still new to them. That's extending your product life cycle. And lowering your economy of scale. As you tier up your manufacturing, of course, your fixed costs are going to go down on a per unit basis. And then, of course, you have your brand, and we're having some trade difficulties, as you will know right now, and hopefully that'll get resolved before the year is up. It's happened before, maybe not quite so many at the same time, but it's happened before. When we say capitalize on the brand, what we really mean there is the safety of the product and the innovation of the recipe and the creativity of the packaging and the marketing, but especially food safety is very appealing to people in other countries and has done a lot to help our exports. And of course, if you still have more capacity than you're able to fulfill, increasing your business is going to help that. And like I said, control your unit cost. So to talk a little bit about Food Export Midwest, it's a private nonprofit international trade organization. It's what you call a state regional trade group, or SRTG. The mission specifically to promote the export of Midwestern food and ag products through their programs and services. The members are the 12 Midwestern state agricultural promotion agencies. 10 of those 12 are departments of agriculture, but not the entire group, as you'll see. The exporters, we're specifically focusing on small and medium-sized exporters, are producers throughout the Midwest. The only real requirement to qualify for these type of products is to have 50% of U.S. agricultural content by weight, less drained liquids, which is kind of a customs procedure. You don't count brine, for example, as weight. That is pretty easy for most people to accomplish, I think, especially out in your area. And here is a list of the member states. You can see Nebraska there, and the two that are not part of it are the Iowa Economic Development Authority and the Ohio Development Services Agency. They have both been participated by ag before and may will again. It just depends on who's the governor and how it's structured. So it runs from Illinois all the way down, and we also actually have just included very recently Oklahoma, and now our 13 states. Sorry, it's a little jumpy. A little vocabulary for you to remember that's quite important is MAP, FAS, USDA. MAP is the Market Access Program. This is where the funds come from to run the majority of operations of Food Export Midwest. This is part of the Farm Bill, which of course you may realize is being negotiated again for the next 5 years and entered into law. For the most part, things are going for MAP programs pretty well, and we look forward to continuing on into the future. It's administered by the Foreign Agricultural Service, which is the international marketing division of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And to explain it in Washington at the cabinet level, there's a Department of Commerce and there's a Department of Agriculture. The Department of Commerce has an international marketing arm, including one there in Omaha, that is called the Commercial Service. And they have about 410 offices across the country, and they're located in most embassies around the world. The Foreign Agricultural Service is the international marketing arm of USDA. They don't have any offices in the United States. And so they fund the state regional trade groups and other MAP beneficiaries, excuse me, to do their work for them. And it is on an annual basis by competitive grant. It's not something that's just given to them. So you have to prove your worth every year, have a good plan, and show great results in order to continue. And that takes a few months out of every year for people to actually work on. And it's just been completed for this year. So when anybody says MAP, it means Market Access Program. FAS is the Foreign Agricultural Service. That's the international marketing arm of USDA. These are the type of products that are covered. It's mostly value-added, consumer-oriented processed products. You have to understand that the commodity groups and seafood and wine and even confectionery have their own MAP funds and MAP program. The state regional trade groups are designed to cover this type of products that you see here that are not covered by any other funding. So we work with a lot of snack food companies and specialty foods, private label, and also ingredients. Those are processed products that you might not be able to recognize, but they're very high value added, as well as we do food service and feed ingredients too. Now, feed ingredients can also be extremely high value and expensive. There's $200, $300 million markets from different feed ingredients, so it's also very important to promote. And then other products too, including even seafood. Now, the way that the program is set up is in 3 tiers. It includes export education, market entry, and market promotion. The export education is always placed first because it's very important for people to learn how to export in order to meet the expectations of these buyers that you'll be meeting through the market entry and market promotion programs. So it's not mandatory that you go through any educational training first, but it is actually really important to do at least at the same time. And through the exporter education, we have what's called the Food Export Helpline. Excuse me, the Export Advisor Program. These are 2 counseling services. The main difference is the helpline is more nuts and bolts and transaction oriented as to how to respond to a trade lead and how to organize a quotation, what type of paperwork's required, these kind of details in regards to shipping. The advisor program is more of a long-term strategic planning program that try and guide you 5 to 10 years into the future on what the best recommendations are for you directing your marketing efforts. The 11 tutorial online system for export education that Food Export has is called Export Essentials Online. Recently revised and updated. These are tutorials that you can go through that have been designed as chronologically oriented as possible, but that's kind of difficult sometimes to accomplish because you never know if you can get a trade lead thrown at you and you haven't had time to do a lot of this work yet. Sometimes you need to, react to it more immediately. We also have a lot of webinars and, of course, seminars that are designed to assist people too. I'm sorry, the slides are running just a little bit fast. I think it's on a timer. And you can find a lot of that information at the website at foodexport.org. That includes a monthly electronic newsletter, excuse me, as well as a published bi-monthly newsletter called the Global Food Marketer that comes out. And you can get on the distribution list from those by working with your food export liaison, who will introduce to you at the end of the presentation. Food Export Helpline, as I mentioned, it provides one-on-one assistance. It's been in existence for 21 years now, primarily designed to support companies that are participating in the other programs, because once you start to do that, you get a lot of export opportunities coming at you, and you need to talk to somebody about how to respond to them and what your best strategy is. And maybe sometimes a trade lead is false or fraudulent. You want to ignore those and go after good ones. There's people that have been in the helpline for over a dozen years. They just click on it every year because it's free. There is a registration required. In fact, one thing to point out about working with Food Export is there's a registration required for everything that you do. It seems slightly bureaucratic, I know, but that's coming from Washington, D.C., which is mandating that to get results on numbers of participation, as well as keeping an eye on the evaluations. So that's just one of them. A lot of the programs are very low cost, if not free. And so we try and make sure that people have access to all the educational information that they can get to make sure that they're confident in what they're doing by developing their competence and their skills in exporting products. These are the type of things that the Food Export Helpline does for people: to work on export readiness evaluation, to work on NAFTA rules and regulations. There's really, as well as all free trade agreements. We have 14 different free trade agreements with 20 countries now. And take a look at the top markets for your products. Do a lot of secondary marketing research, which has been developed mostly by the agricultural trade offices overseas at FAS that they send in on a daily basis, so we can keep up on what's going on in the market. There's a lot of work with paperwork and correspondence and payments and collections and, you know, designing different, like every customer might be unique because of their country they're in, so you kind of have to approach things a little bit differently every single time. And then we have about 50 webinars recorded that are stored in the website now. We just did one on the 6th. There's another one next week on private labeling. And those get recorded like this one is, and they're kept in the archives for people to study later. Usually you'll have one webinar per month, just like the T3, that is available to keep up on different things that are happening in the market. And of course, there's a lot of things that are happening now as far as the tariff increases in the different countries and things that we're keeping a very close eye on. So we often will make sure that we're responding to changes in the industry with webinars, or to bring in various consultants and in-market representatives of food export to talk about certain aspects of the industry or their own particular markets. Now, the market entry is where what we call the international marketing program activities. These are the ones where you may travel, you may not travel, but they're really led by what we call buyer's missions. There's about 20 buyer's missions per year. Many of them are associated with a trade show, a domestic trade show in a certain industry like fancy food, natural products, sweets and snacks, national restaurant show, things like that. And in this case, Food Export is inviting and bringing in buyers of these type of products from all around the world to come and meet with you. Like this group here is from North Dakota. They're at a buyer's mission, and they set up their samples and their wares at a table like that. And the buyers come and they sit with you, you know, up to all day. You can meet with 10 or 12 buyers in a day at a buyer's mission. It's really great. So we've got big ones coming up this summer. It starts in Kansas City on July 30th and moves on to Lansing, Michigan, and then down to Chicago during the course of that week. There's 22 different buyers that are coming to that one. So it's a great way to get started, to meet foreign buyers right there at the table and have them sample your products and talk to you about their market and give you a good idea from their perspective what your potential is in their particular country. So it's the way that most people first meet foreign buyers, if not at a trade show. And speaking of trade shows, they also have the Food Show Plus program. That's a foreign trade show overseas where you're taking advantage of their in-market representatives' particular skills in translating your materials and bringing buyers to your booth and studying the customs clearance requirements and things like that. And then they also have focused trade missions, which involve overseas travel as well. They do about 15 or 16 of those per year, depending on the country and the particular types of products that they're looking for. And then also they offer the primary market research, an opportunity to meet buyers overseas with the market builder. That's using the skills of the in-market representative overseas hired by Food Export to help you get a foothold in the market. And then online, there's the product catalog where you could put your products up in the system, and it's a private trade system that the login and password is only given to in-market representatives and foreign buyers who qualify. So it's private, and so you're not going to get any scam approaches through that. You're going to get leads that either come from the in-market rep or come from a buyer directly that are interested in your types of products. And that's also free and something that you might want to look into if you're not doing it already. I mentioned the in-market representatives a couple of times now to talk to you a little bit more about them. These are the countries that are covered. I think there's actually 20 of them now around the world, and many of them cover more than one market specifically. They are the ones who are qualifying the buyers to come to the buyers' missions. They are the ones who are organizing the Food Show Plus overseas for you. They're the ones that are hosting the trade missions where the delegation of U.S. companies goes to the market. And they're the ones who do the market builder, primary market research for you. So they drive all of the overseas marketing activities for Food Export. And really, without them, we would be kind of trying to drive on 3 tires. It wouldn't work too well. So they do a wonderful job, and they're extremely important and lead to a lot of successes of our Midwest exporters. And to talk a little bit more about the market builder, it's divided into 2 parts, either the market scan or the rep finder, or you could do both. The difference is the market scan, it's primary market research customized to your particular product and your needs, that you have a conference call with the in-market representative and the staff from Food Export to talk about the potential of the product in the market. If they don't feel it's a good fit, they'll tell you right then, and you politely move on to another market. And that does happen sometimes, depending on what the regulations are and how saturated it is and things like that. But that's market research. So they actually go in, let's say a retail product, they go into the store and they look at all the competing products and they look at where they're made and how much they cost and this type of thing. And they talk to the buyers of the stores and show them your samples and talk to them about your company and kind of are representing you there. And it's tremendously successful. And then the rep finder is the second part. Like if you do a market scan and the potential is really high, you actually can travel to the market and the in-market representative will arrange meetings for you, go to the meetings with you, translate when necessary, and help you qualify your leads afterwards to focus on which ones have the greatest potential for you. So it's really something special and very unique and something that companies take advantage of. You can see as we're going along, Food Export has a lot of different programs and services, and usually most people do 2 or 3 or 4 per year different things. They might travel once to a trade show or on a trade mission. They'll go to a buyer's mission. They'll take advantage of the export opportunities and any other thing that comes up that kind of matches their strategic plan of their market based on their product and their particular interests that they have. Okay, we also have, as I mentioned, the Food Show Plus. This is some more detail on what the Food Show Plus does. Again, this is driven by the in-market representative. And there's certain food shows that USDA authorizes for you to use the branded funding to go to. So any Food Show Plus is going to be authorized for you to travel and help you with the show, your cost in the booth and everything like that. But what Food Show Plus really does is it's like you have a temporary employee in that market that's waiting for you to come over that already translated your marketing materials and studied the customs requirement of your product. They take you on store tours. They introduce you to FAS staff overseas, and they direct people to your booth, and they qualify your leads. I mean, it's just a wonderful program, as you can see. And I also had mentioned buyer's mission, so we've talked about that. I did not mention that they're usually in conjunction with a trade show. The one that's coming up at the end of July is quite large. It's not part of a trade show. And they travel primarily by bus, and they also do that in the winter in the Northeast. And there's also one just last week in Miami that was not part of a trade show, that was focused only on buyers from the Caribbean and Central and South America. Those are the three that are not associated with a show. So if you have a snack food, you might want to do the buyer's mission at the Sweets and Snacks show at NCA. If you've got a food service product, you might want to go to the National Restaurant Show. If you've got a super healthy, organic, natural product, you might want to go to Natural Products West or East, etc., like that. It just depends on what your product is, but there's shows for just about everything. Now, there's also the focused trade missions, as I mentioned. That is a complete immersion. It's usually about 8 to 10 companies. It's not a huge crowd. And the meetings are arranged for you in the market after you decide that you want to go. So they don't pre-arrange buyer meetings. They want to make sure that they're matched up the product specifically with what you're looking for. And you do store tours there and get market briefings, and then you have a tabletop exhibition, and they bring the media in, and it's kind of like a news event. And then, of course, you have meetings, one-on-one meetings with buyers. And like I said, there's over a dozen of those per year. So all this is available to look at in the food export calendar. And again, that's foodexport.org, where you can find all this information that I'm talking about. Now, the market promotion is what we refer to as the branded program. And that is our cost sharing. And it's 50% reimbursement of eligible export marketing expenses. What does that mean? That means that you actually apply for the program and you put in a strategy for the year for your expenditures. And let's say you decide you wanted to spend $10,000 and you put the 4 or 5 things that you're going to use the funds for. If that's all approved, as long as you save all your receipts and it's all authorized activity, you get 50% of that back, less your administration fee of 6%, which is actually a 44% net to you. Meaning if you did spend that $10,000 like to a T, and you had all the receipts to back it up, you would get $4,400 back. So by net after the fee, it's a 44% reimbursement to you on your eligible expenses, which include advertising and promotions, trade show, that includes travel, in-market promotions and demonstrations, public relations, anything that you do in a market to help promote the fact that it's a U.S. product. And that's the whole key to it, that 50% U.S. agricultural content by weight is to make sure that the product is dominantly U.S. ingredients. And like I said, that's not terribly difficult for people to accomplish in the Midwest. A lot of people use it to do their label changes in the foreign language, and they use it to send samples. You know, sending samples can add up to a lot of money internationally during the course of a year. So, excuse me, they especially if something's perishable. And so that will help you with that. And if you are redesigning or designing your website or doing social media in other languages or specifically for export purposes, it now reimburses you for that as well. It's a huge, huge lift for small companies to get that kind of assistance to grow their business. And, you know, most people otherwise probably wouldn't do it, or certainly wouldn't do it as much. So this is what's called the branded program. And the majority of the funds that are allotted by MAP through Food Export are used to support exporters through this area of business. So you have to be careful, though. You have to be very meticulous. You have to make sure that you get everything approved. You have to make sure that you execute it correctly. You have to make sure you keep all your receipts. And above all, you need to make sure that it says USA origin on everything. It could be made in Nebraska, product of Nebraska, grown in Nebraska, or the United States, or USA, US, all those are fine. But it has to say it. That's what USDA is trying to promote by helping you get into those markets, as long as that you make sure that you're identifying the product properly. So not only the 50% content by weight, but to make sure that you identify the product. Now that includes all your giveaway items too. I mean, you could buy refrigerator magnets and pens and glasses and things like that from China or wherever. That's different because your brand needs to say made in the USA on there as well, okay? That's the important thing to remember, and where people get in some difficulty is they forget that they have to put made in the US or Nebraska on everything. Every single thing that represents the company that they use that money for has to be reflective of that. The other thing that people have problems with is making, they don't keep all the receipts, so you can't prove that you actually did what you're claiming. So often the person who's the branded contact in a company might be more of an accounting person or finance person, maybe not the salesperson, somebody who's much more comfortable with numbers and tracking things and reporting them. And I notice in many cases there is a branded contact in companies that I see in the system that is not the person that I talk to or that is going to the shows and things like that. And that's because the company is rightly delegated to somebody who's more of a numbers person, who's very meticulous and keeps good records. That's important. So there is minimum and maximum, and the minimum request is $2,500, which means you're going to spend $5,000. The maximum is $300,000. Very few people, of course, reach that. They are usually cooperatives because they're not small companies. Most small companies could never really afford that, of course, right? That means they'd have to spend $600,000. Now, they're also a little bit careful. If you don't have exporting experience, you can go up to only $25,000. If you have experience, initially you can go to $50,000. They don't want you to struggle using the funds. If you're learning how to export still, you should probably be a little bit more on the conservative side about how much to use to start with and get used to it. There's a $250 application fee. It's non-refundable, and a 6% admin fee, which is non-refundable and based on the approved allocation. So that's why I say it's 44% net, because you have to make sure that you understand you're paying 6%, and that's for the administrative fee to run the program. There isn't any other money that they get to operate this, so they have to use funds to be able to give it to you. That's the logic behind that. So keep that in mind. And that sometimes people say, wow, that's a lot, Well, it's not really. It's just a matter if you're ready or not. And so it's something to keep in mind. And you can use it for 5 years per market. It doesn't have to be consecutive. You can walk away for a year or two. What they say you shouldn't do, though, is don't put it in and say, okay, I'm going to do all this in Canada, and then you realize you're not going to, because you're going to pay that fee no matter what, so you've got to be careful. You can get the limit raised during the course of the year, but you can't lower it. So I would be conservative about it if it were me to start with. It runs on a calendar year, but coming up in August 1st is the original application date. So if you find yourself interested, August 1st is the first time that you can actually apply for the next year. You can study all this in the website. They have its own web link on all about the branded program. And you also need to make sure that you have to evaluate your experience with it and also turn in all your receipts for the year by February 28th. After that, it gets less likely that you're going to get it all refunded, because there's lots of people who do this immediately to make sure that they get reimbursed. So make sure that you follow all the guidelines very specifically. It's not something that you can kind of walk through. You have to pay attention to it. and make sure that it's worth it to you. And it is, as long as you have dedicated eyes on it. So that's all about the branded program. Now, all of our states have a designated liaison. Your designated liaison for Nebraska is Paul Weiss. He's at pweiss@foodexport.org, and that's his direct line. If you have any more questions about any of these programs, maybe some of you may know Paul already. If you don't, it's worth emailing him or calling him and saying hello and get to know him. And any questions that you have about these programs that you want in more detail or any other information, Paul can help you. And he is the main contact for Nebraska, and he's been there a few times to visit with companies. So that's all I have right now as far as food export goes. I look forward to your questions.
Awesome. Well, Dennis, this is Heidi Garvin from GROW. And first off, I just wanted to let everyone know we will be sending out a follow-up email with Paul's information in it. So if you do have additional questions following this, you should have that in your email inbox. But right off the bat, Dennis, could you tell us, for somebody just dipping their toes in this for the first time, would you recommend doing the Food Plus show and going overseas to meet buyers, or would you start with a domestic buyer's mission?
That's a very good question. I think that I would start domestically, and the main reason is that it's less expensive and more immediate. And I think that the Food Show Plus and foreign trade shows are something that you can grow into. The exception for me would be one that you're completely convinced is perfect for you. And, it's not that you've been there before. There's some restriction on that. It's the fact that, you're going to go no matter what. Then, of course, if you're going to go, you should take advantage of the funding opportunity. However, even with the support that you get, there is quite an outlay of investment to be made there. And if you were going to do that, what I would make sure I would do is to really work hard on my export readiness to make sure that I can answer questions that people are going to ask me at that show, and that I don't have to go all the way back home and then try and learn how to export. I would really want to be able to present myself there as ready to go. And, you'd certainly like to do that at buyer's missions as well, but especially with an overseas investment. So I can tell you that usually what people do is when I said they do 2 or 3 or 4 things, they may apply for branded and they have a plan in there. If they do go to a Food Show Plus, often it's to Canada, which is much more immediate and closer and easier to get in and out of. They go to a buyer's mission or 2. They might do a trade mission. Now, there's a lot less expense in doing a trade mission than a trade show, of course, because you're not exhibiting. And then they fill in their webinars and maybe do a seminar and study and export essentials. So you're kind of doing 4 or 5 things a year at the same time. That's the general kind of pattern that people follow, is they start to learn over time which works best for them. I've seen comments of companies that are, have built some good export business over the years that say, I only go to this show overseas, and I only go to this mission, and I only use branded funds for this. They can get very targeted in what their company needs. So everybody, you can't kind of diagnose this as all the same. Everybody's got different products. Everybody's looking at different markets. Everybody's company is organized a bit differently.
Kind of.
What you do to what your specific needs are and what your capabilities are as far as your capacity. I mean, when you're running small businesses, I don't have to tell anybody on the line today that if you're in charge, you're doing everything. And it's what I call the Rainmaker, right? It doesn't rain without you. And when you take something like this on, it's really important to delegate it to the right people if you have them. Because it takes time. Like any new venture, it takes some time. And when people tell me that they're hesitant, my answer always is, well, you started a small business To me, that's scary. Okay. So trust me, don't be afraid of this. You're the one who started your business and you're succeeding. So that's a lot harder than entering into this. All you have to do is make yourself comfortable with the information. It is not scary. It is not a ripoff. It is not intimidating. As long as you get the right training and backup and you figure out who the right people are to help you with what different avenue of it, and make sure that you are fully aware what your State Department of Agriculture does for you as far as certification and opportunity. You see, Nebraska, being the member of food export, represents the state's interest to food export, meaning that they can draw down on these funds to point people in the direction that they think they want to go. So they're effectively representing all of the companies here today to food export on activities that they think are best for the companies in the state. So, you know, long answer is all that. Short answer is it depends, but I'd say it's definitely more than one or two things that they do per year. You want to make sure that it's worth it to you. And the only way that's going to happen is to make sure that you can speak. And when I say speak the buyer's language, I don't mean a foreign language. I mean the language of trade. So if they start asking you questions and they're using abbreviations and vocabulary that you don't know, it's quite likely that you could have learned all that in advance. That's my biggest concern and the biggest challenge that I think people face. It's really easy today to get in front of foreign buyers. When I started out, and I started in international trade June 6, 1981. Where does that put me? 37 years. Wow. And everything was called foreign trade then, right? It's foreign. What does that mean? Mysterious. We don't use that anymore. Do you notice? We say global. And I used to send telexes over a wire into India and Pakistan. I used to fax for years. That's all I did was send and receive faxes. Look how different that's changed, you know. And you never even saw your customer, you know, it was just a person. And now today it's completely different. You know, you can go to one of these missions and you meet 10 of them, 12 of them in the same day. They come and sit down in front of you. It's like unheard of 15 or 20 years ago. So it's changed a lot. So here's the problem. Buyers are really easy to meet, you know, with all our internet capability and all that. A lot of it's fraud online, though, unfortunately, but they're a lot easier to meet. Meaning, if the meeting is more immediate and quicker, so should be your education. You know what I mean? You really have to go, wow, I look at all these people interested in my product. I better figure out what I'm doing, right? That's what I mean, meet their expectation, is to be competent in this and to be able to fulfill orders and be able to communicate with them the way that they expect to. So the platforms are wonderful for meeting people, but they do expect some level of competence to back it up. And that's where we have our great divide. And we cannot afford for people to not export because they have the wrong impression of it. We cannot afford for people not to export because they tried it for a little while and didn't get immediate success. We cannot afford to have people not export because they didn't educate themselves properly and had a bad experience. We're trying to manage all that to make sure it doesn't happen. Still only 1% of American manufacturers export. And if you can believe that, of small businesses make up about 69% of the total value, but small businesses that export generally only go to 1 or 2 countries. And that's still not enough. It can be expanded easily and readily using all these programs, but as long as you make sure that you learn how, like I say all the time, the who is easy. You can see by this presentation that meeting buyers is not a stretch of the imagination at all. The how is what you want to make sure you balance your marketing with your skill. If you do that, you're bound for success. If you don't, you might not enjoy the results as much as that you would expect to.
Kind of building off of that, when you go to a buyer's mission or, you know, the Food Plus show or something along those lines, what kind of an investment do people tend to make in their display, their exhibit?
Well, buyer's missions are meetings. They're private meetings. So you don't bring curtains. Some people, if they can get a table that has some space behind them up against the wall, might try and put something on the wall. You may use a skirt on your table, but it's a kind of a low investment because the meeting room is, there might be 25 or 35 companies in there. So your back might be to somebody, and there's nothing behind you but another person, facing the buyers in their direction. So that's not a big investment. The major investment is in the show, and a lot of the stuff at the show you can actually rent when you're there, and branded program covers that too. You might bring your own particular curtain and, of course, your samples and your wares and your materials, but like chairs and tables and plants and all that, they can be provided by the show. And as long as you save all your receipts for all that, you can get that reimbursed too. It's a much greater investment overall than a buyer's mission, which in many cases might just include a lengthy drive back and forth or an overnight stay in a hotel, or maybe two, depending on where it is. So there's a big difference in cost. There's a big difference in equipment. And, at trade shows, those of you who go to those realize that you're so busy at your booth that you don't have time to sit down with people and talk to them for 25 minutes. You could only do that 10 times in a day, and the day's done. That's what buyer's missions are for. They're more personal, they're more immediate, and there's not a lot of promotion that needs to go on. If they like your product and they think that there's a match, it can move pretty quickly. You could enter into the product registration process or quotation process relatively quickly. With a trade show, sometimes if you go to the show in the United States, that's very international. A lot of them are, right? If you go to the winter fancy food or the summer fancy food, which really that starts tomorrow, the buyer's mission there. Most of those shows are crawling with international buyers now. In fact, at certain times of the day, it seems like there's more foreign buyers in the show than there are U.S., particularly early. They come early. So you could get approached a lot, but there's not a lot of time to discuss right then. That's going to happen later. You may not get a chance to get to know them very well. If they're very interested, I'm told often they'll come back and maybe they'll bring their boss with them or somebody else they work with. That can happen. So obviously a trade show in the United States isn't going to cost as much as a foreign one, and you're going to meet a lot of buyers. Many times there's the buyer's mission going on at the same time as those shows. And that kind of puts a strain. If you're only sending one person or maybe two people, it's hard for them to do both because the buyer's mission often is on the day of the setup of the show. That makes it a little harder. So there's so sometimes they say, I can't do the buyer's mission, or I'm only going to do the buyer's mission and not the show. And then sometimes they go, well, we got 4 people, so we're fine. We can do both easily. It just depends on how much, labor you have available to cover yourself. So that can change every time as well. So there's varying levels of expense and there's varying levels of buyer meeting depending on which one you go to, what the products, if it's geared towards your product more or rather than less, and what the interest of the foreign buyers are.
Awesome. And Dennis, we had a question submitted in chat from Sierra Forest with Simply Sunflower Oil. She says they're attending their first trade mission in Mexico City and also the Midwest Buyers Mission in Kansas City next month. You mentioned that you should be presenting yourself as ready to go. Do you have like a bullet point list of what we should be sure to bring with them, what they should be sure to bring with them, or additional information so that they can accurately speak the language of trade?
Yes, thanks, Heidi. Hi, Sierra. Thank you for your question. I saw in your registration that you asked for assistance in advance of the buyer's mission. Registration is closing on that tomorrow. And once it closes, then I know who's asked for help, and I'll be in touch with you on that. I have a package to send you. The trade mission I'm not involved in. I would recommend either you sign up for the helpline or you explore Food Export's website to look at the videos on Mexico and the webinars on Mexico. But if there's something you want to work with specifically on that, just sign up for the helpline and we can do that too. The buyer's mission preparation does not require helpline registration. It's value added to the event, but it doesn't get involved in trade mission. So the choice is yours. Either way, you'll be hearing from me probably by Monday, okay?
She says, sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dennis, would you be willing to talk a little bit about the high costs of shipping when you start exporting?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Actually, I'm not under the impression that it's high. And also, it's a very rare event when a U.S. company would actually pay for it. You might get involved in paying for it to a port, but you add that onto your invoice and the buyer pays you back. So most food exports actually goes on a collect basis to the buyer. Many of the buyers that we work with use what's called the consolidator. Many of them are in Houston or Miami or New Jersey or Oakland, somewhere port proximate. And they've hired these people to load multiple containers of pallets for them, thereby lowering their freight costs by having all their orders for a month, for example, in one container. They do not need you to ship to their country. They need you to ship, for, like I said, to Miami. And your freight rate to Miami, you're actually protecting on your invoice, and they're paying you for that too. Ocean freight, in fact, is very inexpensive. I just went through a transaction a couple of weeks ago where we costed out bottles of barbecue sauce going to Sao Paulo, Brazil at 37 cents each. And if you think about it, it was, 16-ounce bottle. You're not going to be able to mail that to Brazil for 37 cents. But if you have 3 pallets on it that get consolidated into a container, that's how much it costs to get there. And that included the inland freight from Michigan. So ocean freight isn't that expensive. There is a good point to mention, though, that you generally, because of the value added of your product, in other words, the price, it doesn't move by the full container at one time. They buy pallets, 1, 2, 3 pallets like that, and it all gets consolidated either by their consolidator, or they may have a freight forwarder who comes and picks it up, or you send it to the freight forwarder. And that's different because the freight forwarder is, they consolidate, but they're not just in the business of handling freight for one client and loading in containers. They actually will ship everything everywhere. And in some cases, if they do ask you to ship internationally, you have the freight forwarder put it in a consolidation from you, and you're paying that ocean freight, but you're also protecting it on your invoice. So I'm under the impression that domestic trucking is way more expensive than ocean freight internationally. And in the rare event something would go by air freight, and often it does, if it's perishable, extremely valuable, it needs to get to market immediately for consumption, like lobster, or certain fruits and vegetables that only last for a month. They do fly them because there's just not enough time to go by ocean. So in that case, it costs more for air freight, but it's a much more expensive product and it sells for more. So as long as the buyer is comfortable with the margin at their turnover to the customer, whether it's food service or retail, they pay for the freight. Very rarely, I can't even tell the last time I heard somebody actually complain about freight being too expensive. There's been a tremendous glut in the steamship line industry because they overbuilt ships. And so in order to try and get business, of course, what they had to do was lower their rates. So right now, I think it's quite near the lowest they've been in a long time. And that's because they still have empty ships that they're not sailing because they over forecast the volume of containers that was going to go around the world. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. It doesn't really come up. I know that Nebraska is a long way to port, but Omaha is actually a customs port. It can be used as an origin on an ocean bill of lading, or it can go on a train there and go all the way to port quite inexpensively as well. It's not as expensive as trucking it, say, to Miami from Omaha as it is putting it on a train.
Awesome. And is that something they could contact you about if they have more questions about how to set up that shipping, how to get it on the train?
Oh, sure. We have 2 recorded webinars on how to select and work with freight forwarders. We have an Export Essentials module on how to conduct international shipping. And I talk to people all the time about, who you should use to do what, to send it where. Yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, there's a lot of people who get a lot of business out of these programs we've talked about today, and it does work, and people do order, and business is happening. And this all is very common activity because we're quite busy, fulfilling all these requirements that these buyers come and they buy, and they've been pre-screened to make sure that they're legitimate and they really want U.S. products. And if they do buy a lot when they come, or they have a great reputation in the market, they get invited back, and they still continue. So it's very exciting. There's a lot of freight moving, so freight movement is a big part of what we all do too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If you have any other questions, now is the time to type them in that little chat box. Let's see. I am going to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for today, the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. And Hunter, I think he said he was able to connect by phone. We're going to check and see.
Yeah. Hi, Heidi. How are you?
Doing well. Awesome. Hunter, at the beginning, we were going to have you tell us a little bit about the Department of Ag before we wrap up for the day. If you would like to tell us about the services you guys offer.
Yeah, sure thing. So I am actually contracted through Food Export Midwest, and I work in the Department of Agriculture in the International Trade Office. So my job within Food Export Midwest is to promote the different services that Dennis talked about earlier in the webinar. And also, if you're a Nebraska producer, you probably got a mailing from me just kind of explaining and promoting all the different food export services that they provide. And also, within the Department of Agriculture, I help connect international buyers with the bulk commodity suppliers from Nebraska.
Awesome. And Hunter has provided us with a handout that you guys will be getting here in your inbox shortly.
And in reference to Sierra's question earlier, if you're talking about the trade mission for Mexico City in I think it's August, I work for the trade representative who's organizing the trade mission, and I can get you an itinerary and maybe some things you might need for the trip. If you'd like to give me an email, it's in the flyer that I sent over to Heidi.
Shouldn't she have gotten those already, Hunter?
For the Mexico trade mission?
Yeah.
I don't believe we have an itinerary completely filled out.
Oh. Because I'm already working on trade missions in September and October.
This is a Nebraska-specific trade mission that...
Oh, you're offline. I see. Okay. Anyway, Hunter, thank you for joining us, and I can see that you're educating yourself quite well in the Export Essentials modules. I wanted to thank you for that, too.
Perfect. Yeah, I enjoy them a lot.
Good.
Very informational.
Good. And give my regards to Stan, will you?
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think I'm not seeing any more questions come up. So just to wrap up for the day, if you enjoyed this training, and Dennis, I have to say, I always love hearing you talk, always love your trainings. There's just packed full with so much great information.
And my pleasure, Heidi, anytime.
Thank you. So everyone else, if you enjoyed this training, make sure you check out some of our other upcoming trainings. We do have one on June 26th, so that's next week, about sharing your story through video. We're bringing in a national speaker from Get Your Business Online with Google. We also have our first Friday training specifically for GROW Nebraska members. So our next one is going to be on July 6th. And on July 19th is our next Third Thursday training. We're going to be talking about why content is the key to social selling success. So we're bringing in Regina DeMars and Danielle Johnson from First National Bank. They'll be able to talk about their strategy and ways that you can make yours even better. So thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Happy summer solstice and National Selfie Day.
Thank you.
Thanks.